Following recent elections, Pakistan has found itself with a hung parliament in which no party commands a majority. Controversial jailed political leader Imran Khan's party declined offers to form a coalition government. According to BBC reporting, two other opposition parties have reached a deal to form a government. The two parties were previously in a coalition that ousted Imran Khan from power in 2022.
The fairness of this week's elections are clouded by allegations of rigging. Per analysis from our next guest, the leading party compromised voting conditions in their own favor. Joining us now to weigh in more on these elections and what they mean for the United States is Deputy Director of the Middle East Program at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, Adam Weinstein. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
So what is going on here? Can you give us more details about the election rigging allegations?
Well, as some of your listeners may remember, Imran Khan, who leads the PTI party, was removed from power via a no confidence vote. And then he became an opposition candidate. And then last May, he was put in jail for various alleged cases of corruption and fraud. And he's remained in jail, and his political party was essentially dismantled. Numerous members of his cabinet and senior party workers were arrested, rearrested, arrested again, and many of them gave statements that they would leave politics altogether. And so it was expected that his political party wouldn't do quite well in these elections, but PTI was very creative. They used deep fakes and authorized AI recordings of Imran Khan and basically campaigned virtually. Since they couldn't campaign in the streets with large gatherings, they did it online. And they essentially pulled off an upset in the polls in which it was pretty clear that they had the lead by a huge margin. But then the election results were delayed for several hours, and all of a sudden that margin became much smaller, small enough that they didn't have enough seats in the parliamentary system of Pakistan to form a government and hold the office of prime minister. And essentially, what seems to be happening, I think it's quite clear, is that the favorite political parties of the military are going to form the government. Now, we have to remember that Imran Khan used to be a favorite of the military, and PTI used to be a favorite of the military. The Pakistani military changes which political parties it backs. But in this case, it's to PTI's disadvantage.
So what you're describing seems to be that there is a clear case, despite, different from the kind of election interference claims that we hear made in the United States about ballot box stuffing or what have you, but a really clear case that the candidate that was overwhelmingly popular and had in fact been sidelined from participating in the election, despite all of that, still managed to win overwhelmingly, but is being kept from having enough votes to govern in the parliamentary system because of the opposition party. Can you help to explain what the political stakes of this are, how Imran Khan managed to pull this off, not just technologically, as you've explained, but what the underlying political issues were that caused him to be popular despite being sidelined and literally imprisoned?
Well, I think Imran Khan is charismatic. He was very good at connecting with Pakistanis. The other parties, such as PPP and PMLN, yes, they do have significant support. They have grassroots support, but they are dynastic parties, and I think younger middle-class Pakistanis were tired of dynasties, and so Imran Khan appealed to them. And he was able to use rhetoric about getting rid of corruption and reforming Pakistan that appealed to the masses. I would argue that his party fell short of some of those goals, but nevertheless, it was central to their message. And I think that was really appealing to the masses. And I also think younger Pakistanis are tired of what they view as interference by the security establishment. And so that was appealing. And essentially, by arresting him and throwing him in prison, they made him a bit of a martyr. Now, I'll point out that most Pakistani politicians go to prison at some point. No prime minister has ever finished out their term. Nawaz Sharif has been to prison, as an example, and he was in self-imposed exile in London. But I think in this case, the appeal of Imran Khan is PTI is not a dynastic party, and he's a very charismatic politician, and he was saying new things.
Yeah, it can be, I think, difficult to see these more evolving democracies where, right, the leaders are routinely jailed before they finish their terms, and the next party comes in, jails the previous leader, and then when there's another political revolution, even democratically or legitimately, then those people go to jail, and it can be hard to process. Everyone is running on corruption, but is it combating corruption, or is it just punishing political enemies, right? Because there can often be something to a charge of corruption, like in all cases, but then is it just persecuting political enemies? How much of that is at play here? And maybe you could talk a little bit about the U.S. perspective on what's going on. I know the perception that the U.S. Intervened is something that Imran Khan made a lot of noise about some time ago.
In terms of corruption, a lot of politicians in Pakistan are corrupt. Most political parties, I'd say, engage in some level of corruption. I actually think, to Imran Khan's credit as an individual, he didn't engage in that much corruption. Of course, that's just my personal opinion. But members of his party did, and he accepted folks from other parties into his inner political circle who were quite corrupt. So PTI is certainly not free from corruption, although I think Imran Khan was less corrupt than your average Pakistani politician. In terms of the anti-American angle, essentially Imran Khan alleged that there was a cipher, and that basically his removal via the no confidence vote was a U.S.-backed regime change conspiracy, and this was due to comments from a senior U.S. official, Don Liu, who basically said that allegedly said, I guess I should say, to the then Pakistani ambassador to the United States, that relations would probably improve between Pakistan and the United States if Imran Khan was not prime minister. Now, let's say that was said. I would argue that maybe that's an inappropriate comment for a U.S. official to make. I don't think that was what prompted the regime change. I think what prompted the regime change, if we call it that, is that Imran Khan had a falling out with the Pakistani military and the security establishment. The ISI chief. So that was, and then the political opposition saw a opportunity to push a no confidence vote through. But of course, Imran Khan knows that due to the history of U.S. regime change, it was going to be a very persuasive argument to say that this was an American-backed regime change. And I think he also thought it was safer to say that than to take on the military head on. Although after a while, he did take on the military head on, and I would argue that's one of the reasons he's in prison.
Yeah, I mean, the real scale of this, I think, was captured in a recent piece by Ryan Grimm at The Intercept, who talks about the fact that Imran Khan, famously a cricket star, had the cricket bat as part of his logo, and not only was stripped from the ballot, wasn't able to use that symbol, which is relevant for a population where there is a significant percent of them that aren't literate, need that iconography to know who to vote for, that there was all of this polling interference. People weren't allowed, every kind of restriction you could imagine. And while we're talking about, laws prohibiting people from passing out water bottles in line at ballot boxes in the United States of America, I mean, you're having initial polling results showing one number that changed dramatically over a short period of time after the polling system goes down. Real strong evidence of election interference, and still Imran Khan coming out on top, even though there's not enough to have a coalition government. So I want to ask you about what the mood of the people on the ground is in the face of all of this seemingly pretty blatant malfeasance, and what the next steps are for Pakistanis.
Yeah, the removal of the symbol for the ballots was a huge blow. As an example, I mean, illiteracy is quite high in Pakistan. I think the figures cited are 40%, but anecdotally, an example is sometimes I'll get in a taxi in Pakistan and I'll ask the driver, hey, put this into your GPS, and I realize after a moment that they simply don't know how to write, and so I have to put it into my GPS or their GPS, and then they can follow it. So that's just a small example. Illiteracy is real. So people use the electoral symbols to figure out who they're voting for. And that's why news media and TV is so important in Pakistani politics versus written media at times. What does it mean for Pakistanis? I think the mood is kind of a mood of defeat among PTI supporters, although also righteous anger. I think it's pretty clear that the coalition that's going to form is going to be with the PMLN in the lead, and I think that's devastating for PTI supporters. Now, many public intellectuals in Pakistan who are huge critics of Imran Khan and huge critics of PTI actually decried the unfair election results. Although now that the parties they support are coming out more on top, you see them backing off a little bit. For the time being in Pakistan, I think what's going to happen is what's always happened. A government's going to form. The world is going to recognize the government, and this issue the can will be kicked down the road a little bit longer. But I think the question is, how long can this status quo remain this way? I mean, you have this youth bulge in Pakistan that's extremely dissatisfied with the status quo, and it's only growing. It's one of the youngest countries in the world. And how long is that youth bulge going to tolerate things? And what is this going to mean if Pakistan needs another IMF bailout or things like that? What's it going to mean for Pakistan's economy?
Adam, thank you so much for joining us to give us all that information. Very helpful, very useful. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.